Today, I would like to introduce the topic Romantic Revival and Revolt. The Romanticism or the Romantic era can be described as a liberation in literature, a liberation from a strong adherence towards the classical norms, rules that were strictly followed in the age of Augustine. That's the reason why the 18th century was known as the age of classicism or the Augustine age because of its strong influence in the laws as well as the rules in which the works were to be written. The word revival actually represents a new presentation or publication of something that is old. What the Romantic revival then means is nothing but an attempt to revive the old sense of romance in literature. Romantic revival refers to the period from late 18th century to 1832 in which the poets, artists and writers across Europe revolted against neoclassicism. An age in which a strong adherence towards the laws was followed that preceded them. It greatly affected the way of thinking, literature and almost all different forms of art, and can be considered as something that coincided with the Industrial Revolution or the French Revolution. Romanticism, of course, is a revolt. It was a revolt against the aristocratic social and political norms of the Age of Enlightenment. Reaction against scientific rationalization of nature. It legitimized the individual imagination as the more dominant one, as a critical authority, and provided freedom from all those notions of art. To understand Romantic revival, we must actually have a glance to the Augustine age. Augustine age can be considered as a classical period of literature, known by different names. It includes the age of classicism, age of novels, Augustine age, age of Pope, age of Johnson, age of Enlightenment. In addition to this, it was also known as the age of sensibility, age of scientific query and reason. It can be considered as a transitional age where a love towards spontaneity, naturalism was very much evident. A transition from all those classical rules towards the Romanticism was evident in 18th century. That's why by mid 18th century the classical text started to lose its interest. Instead, more spontaneous and natural works in a way started to gain interest, which actually paved the way to the most important Romantic era. Characteristics of Romantic revival. The most important characteristic of Romantic revival was an interest in Middle Ages or medievalism. It led to the revival of romance. A craze or a quest for all those ancient, primitive, magical and supernatural elements gained importance during this time. Emergence of Gothic style is worth mentioning. Horace Walpole is the most important name in association with the Gothic style of writing. He was very much fascinated by the medieval history. He ultimately even built a fake Gothic castle called Strawberry Hill House, which is still famous. And his influence or his fascination was so strong that it actually made him to write or attain a new level by writing a Gothic novel, that is The Castle of Otranto, that was published in the year of 1765 and is considered to be the first Gothic novel. The integral part of Gothic styles introduced by the Horace Walpole includes the ruins, castles, ghosts and supernatural. The influence of Castle of Otranto was so deep that great writers of those ages started to comment upon it. According to Byron, it is considered to be the first romance in language. Scott, who is known for his praisings, praised it with reckless generosity. Other writers like Clara Reeve, Anne Radcliffe, Matthew Gregory Lewis made imitations on the work Castle of Otranto. The Castle of Otranto was imitated by Clara Reeve in the work named Old English Baron, whereas Anne Radcliffe's work The Mysteries of Udolpho is another example. Still, the complete disappearance of Augustine tradition and the patterns was thus not disappearing completely. The shades of the classicism still followed or was reflected in the works of Samuel Johnson and Oliver Goldsmith. That's why Hudson makes the following comment that the last great works of the outgoing artificial 18th century school. It was the comment that was given by Hudson on the works of Samuel Johnson and Oliver Goldsmith. Knowingly or unknowingly, the rupture of traditionalism was slightly visible even in their works. The way in which Johnson treated the nature and rural life, as well as the Oliver Goldsmith personal reminiscent writings, are the very good example to point out in this occasion. To be more precise, Johnson, in the end of his career, had revised the poem London, and he regretted that he had missed several pastoral elements in London. Similarly, Goldsmith's writings, the reminiscence is very much visible and accurate. A comparison between classicism and romanticism will help us to more understand what the romantic revival is, or the changes that took place, or the difference between both of them. Classicism, it is a product of intelligence. It lacks emotion, imagination, and romantic spirit. The writers were mostly confining themselves in the coffee houses or within the drawing rooms. This had made it attain the title, the town poetry. In addition to this, they were extremely formal and artificial in style. They adhered rigorously to the closed couplet and was very much strict in following the rules of forms. On the other hand, Romanticism gave importance or emphasized the importance of emotion, passion, and imagination. It considered imagination as the prominent authority in the case of writing a work. Nature and rustic life seem to have returned in the works of the Romantic age. The romantic spirit was very much evident in those works. Simplicity in phrase and language is to be noted. For example, God rest his soul. This phrase was improved and refined during the Augustine age as eternal blessings on his shade attend, something that was difficult for the common people to understand. The Romantics or the transitional poet considered this as unacceptable, and they tried to reject or started to reject this overt influence that was asserted in the Augustine age. They attacked the supremacy of close couplet and give importance to new forms like blank verse. Age of transition, struggle between old and new. It was an era where we could witness the struggle between the old and introduction of a new one. However, the victory was gained by the new one. Continuation versus breaking up of Augustine tradition was the most important topic to be dealt with. Open protest started to gain wide strength during that age. Pope was a great wit but not a great poet, since his works lacked those imaginative and emotional qualities which are essential for true poetry. This is a comment made by Hudson in the work Essay on Pope. It reflects the idea that how important is imagination and the spontaneity for a poet, or this can be considered as an entrance to the idea of romanticism. Addition to the Essay on Pope written by Wharton, Edward Young also made a wonderful remark in his work Conjurers on Original Composition. He says that poets should leave off the imitating classical models and depend upon nature and promptings of individual genius. It too says about the importance one writer should give to his own imaginative power and the spontaneity. This age actually witnessed a change in form. They started to abandon the popular close couplet of that Augustan age and started to use blank verse. In addition to it, the Spenserian revival was evident. The imitation of Spenser by the influence of some men of learning and genius seemed likely to grow upon the age, but deplores this moment. Some of the works by the writers like William Shenstone, Thomson, Beattier is very much important, as these are the very important evidences for the revival in the Romantic revival. The Schoolmistress by William Shenstone, Thomson's Castle of Indolence, James the Minstrel are very important in this aspect. Superiority of natural and spontaneity was evident in the works of this time. Growth of love towards nature or the ballad revival was seen in this age. Development of naturalism or a return to nature was what the real motto of the Romanticism was. Ballads, which was not given any dominance during the time of the Johnson and Pope, gained importance towards the end of the 18th century. They were started to be considered as the voice of the nature by the transitional writers and following writers. Showing admiration of Milton was another important thing. The writers started to use pastoral elements with Milton's grandeur language. To mention James Thomson's Seasons, Somerville's Chase, Young's Night Thought and Blair's Grave are very important examples which shows or which evidence itself as the admiration of Milton. Spontaneity and naturalism gained prominence during this age, and this is evident to the words of Hudson. Nature, in its wilder and more rugged aspect, shocked the refined taste of a generation which had been trained to prefer the trim garden to the unspoiled hillside. This clearly denotes the rejection of those carefully cultivated conventional mannerisms of the Augustan age. The writers that is mentioned in this slide are very prominent or instrumental to depict the romantic tendency in the late 18th century. This includes Thomas Chatterton, Collins, James Macpherson, Robert Burns, William Cowper and Gray. Robert Burns, William Cowper and Gray is difficult to classify whether they are belonging to Augustan poet or Romantic writers, because both the elements of Augustan age and the Romanticism was evident in their works. Letters on Chivalry and Romance by Richard Hughes can be considered as a forerunner of Romantic age. Relics on Ancient English Poet is also worth mentioning. These works were a great influence for the Romantic taste. What is Romanticism? It is not right to simply consider it as those that are against the Augustan age. It is the interest in medieval and Gothic tradition, a love for spontaneity and assertion of individuality. A strong passion, sensibility, aspiration and melancholy were very much reflected in the works of those age. A love of wild rather than confining oneself to the limited spaces, a love for the wild world of nature and fantasy and supernatural was also seen in the works. Interest in romantic past is a very important aspect in this. That's all for today's class. Thank you.